Give you an A.
Great country legends gathered together for an all.
Charlie Walker, Bobby Lord, Wanda Jackson, Jim Ed Brown, Jan Howard, Johnny Wright and Kitty Wells, and Stu Phillips. So if we can just get our makeup on, we'll be ready.
Who that? Who that? Yeah, who that say who that, but don't say who that.
Lordy, who that?
Who that say who that, but
They're getting
don't
the close-up of us. Huh? They're getting the close-up of us.
Oh, yeah. Be sure and get that ring for me.
Oh, Lordy.
So you get here early and you get all the press.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. We want to know, my mama didn't raise no idiots.
Old trick of the trade.
And Bill Carlisle worked up there when we was working in Knoxville on the midday merry-go-round, and he went Hot Shot Elmer, that's what we called
funny,
him.
wasn't it? I remember all his routines.
Oh, yeah. Now, Martha can tell you some stories, I'm sure.
School to place set way up on the hill. And, of course, Bill looked like an octopus when he got out of the car. He'd stick his Hot Shot Elmer kid up under his arm, he had an amplifier down here and a guitar in the other arm. He walked up the hill and he said, girl said, what's after that big hole now? They're digging a well there. I said, be sure you remember where that's at when we come out of here. Who fell in the hole? Bill. Amplifier, guitars and all. But he was always a good sport. He'd come out of there laughing, but his shins were just scraped all over.
If I can find one of these women brave enough to work on my face, I might fall in one of them cracks and choke them. Come on, is anybody here make me look like her?
Is this where the people are going to be, right here? Ah. C'est vrai, c'est là le monde va apparaître droit là. Ouais, tas du monde. Tas du monde. C'est bon matin pour le tas du monde. Non, on a la caméra à droite là. On peut prendre des figures, des vieilles figures, des gros nez, toutes sortes de yeux, des yeux rouges, des yeux de cadran, avec des belles fentes qu'on peut mettre le make-up dessus la figure. S'il vous plaît, monsieur. Messieurs, mesdames, mes chers amis.
Hey, they want to get your picture. They'll have your picture.
We can handle that, can't we?
Oh, yeah. All by ourselves.
Yeah, something's wrong with my glasses. Can you see out of them? Oh, you ain't got them on. That's the only thing. Yeah.
How y'all doing, gang? Good to see you. Hi there, brother. Good to see you again. It's James David back there and Anderson Whisper. Looks like the gang's all here.
Oh, there's a bunch of us here.
Gang's all here.
We're going to have a good day.
Praise the Lord. We're all here and we're all getting ready to praise the Lord and sing some wonderful gospel songs.
Give you an A? Hey, what? We're doing we're going to open with everybody singing them. While I was singing, somebody touched me. While I was singing, somebody touched me. While I was singing, somebody touched me. Must have been the hand of the Lord. While I was singing, somebody touched me. While I was singing, somebody touched me. While I was singing, somebody touched me. Must have been the hand of the Lord. Glory, 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 somebody touched me. Glory, 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 somebody touched me. Glory, 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 somebody touched me. Must have been the hand of the Lord. While I was praying, somebody touched me. While I was praying, somebody touched me. While I was praying, somebody touched me. It must have been the hand of the Lord. Glory, 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 somebody touched me.
Somebody touch me, glory, glory, glory. Somebody touch me, glory, glory, glory. Somebody touch me, it must have been the hand of the Lord. While I was kneeling, somebody touched me. While I was kneeling, somebody touched me. While I was kneeling, somebody touched me. It must have been the hand of the Lord. Glory, glory, glory. Somebody touched me. Glory, glory, glory. Somebody touched me. Glory, glory, glory. Somebody touched me. It must have been the hand of the Lord. It must have been the hand of the Lord.
Yes. I would imagine if I had to go around this room to everybody in here, I bet you nearly every hand would go up if I said, was the first place you ever sang a song in church? I imagine nearly every one of us in this room, that was the first place we ever sang a song. Anywhere in public.
Mama taught me everything I ever knew, especially in church. She made me sing. You know, and I guess I was 6 years old whenever I first started singing in church. Anyway.
Sang a solo?
No. Oh, solo? Oh, goodness. Well, you know what? You could say there was almost a solo, but because the little church I went to, there wasn't over about 15 or 20 people, you know, that was members there. And it was a little Methodist church. I remember I used to have to harness up the team in the morning, you know, because Daddy was off working somewhere in the logwoods or something or another, and he couldn't get in. But anyway, on a Sunday morning, that was my job, to harness the team and hitch them to the wagon. And we would travel that about 5 miles to that little Methodist church. And it wasn't many people there, you know. Sometimes if it was a bad day or something, you know, or the crops were trying, you know, everybody was trying to harvest their crops. Sometimes it might not have been, but about 8 or 10 or maybe 15 people total, really. And everybody sang. We didn't have a place up there for the choir. You know, we were the choir.
We didn't have, nobody had a choir then.
I know, that's true, you know.
The membership was the choir.
Black sheep.
You used to what?
I sang black sheep in the church when I went to church. And because the preacher just like that song, little story song that I've had for a long time. And back whenever I was just 11, 12 years old,
what is black sheep?
He'd have me to stand up and do a solo. It's a black sheep. It's called Black Sheep.
Sing part of it.
In a little country village, not very far away, there lived a rich but aged man whose hair was turning gray. It was something like that. It's really a good just folk song like, but it's not a real gospel song. But the preacher loved that song, and I was just a kid, 10, 11 years old.
But didn't most of y'all sing the songs like Somebody Touched Me, where, I mean, it's everybody sings along and not the Pentecostal type country kinds of songs. What about you, Charlie Walker?
Well, I grew up, the first songs I sang was in church. When I was 4, 5, 6 years old, Mama put me up went to a little Methodist church. And I went to the Methodist church one year. The next year I'd go to the Baptist church, whichever one had the best baseball team. That's just telling it like it is. My dad was Methodist, and so I'd go to the Methodist church. But anyway, no, that's the first songs that I ever sang. Yeah.
You had to kind of argue with your record company to get them to let you record a gospel album one time.
I've had 35 albums, and I had in the late 60s. I wanted to do a gospel album, so I went into my producer and I said I'd like to do a gospel album and do the old Pentecostal Baptist type hymns that I sung as a boy. He said, those things are not selling now. I said, what do you want to do that for? And I said, well, I want to do it while my mother and dad are still alive. I just want to do it and kind of dedicate it to them. And so he said, okay, it's your money if you want to do it. So we did it, and I did Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, Farther Along. And
we ain't even got started yet, Charlie, and you've done backslid. You started out at Methodist, now you're already Baptist.
Good, honey, keep it. I was just about to interrupt him over here myself and tell him that we've heard from 2 Methodists in a row. Now let's have some time for the Baptists, if you don't mind. And Bill, I tell you what, when I first started going to church, I was about 6 or 7 years old, and they used to let me come up front and lead the congregation. And I knew how to do this because my daddy taught shape note singing, see, and so on the downbeat, you know, you kept the tempo going that way, and I loved it then. I still love it. I think it's some of the most, you know, Sage Hill Baptist Church is where we used to do this, though. It may be in other churches, but that's where we started.
Well, whether it's Methodist or Baptist, we'll cross all the lines. Charlie, sing us one of those songs from that gospel album.
Can I tell a story, and you can cut it out if you don't want to use it? No. It's clean. It's clean. This lady, her dog got real sick, and she loved this dog so much, and she took him down the church to the Baptist church and told the pastor, said, would you please pray for my dog? Said, I love this dog, and I don't want him to die. And he said, well, ma'am, he said, I just pray for human beings. He said, no, I don't pray for animals, but he said, the Methodist preacher down the street here said, you pray for anybody anytime. So, and she said, well, that's fine. I'll take him down there. She said, do you think that honorary for him praying with about $500 would be about right? He said, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know your dog was Baptist.
I think you better sing, Charlie.
Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shores. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to that home where joy shall never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by.
Bill, the guy that wrote that song, Mr. Albert E. Brumley, I had a couple of his sons work for me at different times, and we used to go by the house, and I'd get to visit with him, and he was a funny old man. He was, you know, he wrote a lot of great gospel songs, and I used to close all my shows with I'll Fly Away, and I asked him one time, I said, you know I close my shows with I'll Fly Away, and he said, yes, I really appreciate that. I said, but sometimes I do it in nightclubs. And I do I'll Fly Away. I said, does that bother you? And he said, well, to tell you the truth, son, that's where they're needed.
Hey, Bill, when I was 15 years old, I went to Stamp's Quartet School of Music in Dallas, and old Albert E. Brumley was my teacher for shape notes. You know, Jeannie Pruitt was talking about, yeah, the do-re-mi's, and so he became a real figurehead as far as the gospel music is concerned, because he wrote so many great songs. But I just thought I'd throw that in. You can throw it out if you want to, but I like the man.
Somebody told me he wrote that great song that the Chuck Wagon Gang used to do called If We Never Meet Again, This Side of Heaven. Somebody told me that the story of that he said, and this is very interesting, even as we sit here in this room, he said that at a concert, that group of people would never, ever, that same group would never, ever be together again. You know, you get in a crowd of, 5,000 people or whatever, and that same group would never be together. And he wanted a song that would kind of unify that group at the time. If we never meet again this side of heaven, I will meet you on that beautiful shore, which that's a beautiful thought, really. It's a beautiful thought, yeah. Bobby Lord, you got a song that is not one of the old traditional Pentecostal gospel songs, but it's certainly one that everybody knows.
I thought I would do this today because, first of all, I love the song. And secondly, there's a little story behind it that needs telling. It's pretty common knowledge that Willie Nelson wrote this song. And in a moment where he needed a few bucks, sold it for $50 to a couple of other individuals. And I thought that was right interesting. But when you stop and think about it, a songwriter writes for money, and this was money when he needed it. And even though he hasn't sold one for $50 since. Let's do Family Bible. There's a family Bible on the table. The pages are torn and hard to read, but that family Bible on the table will ever be my key to memory. I can see us sitting round the table when from the family Bible that would read, and I can hear my mama softly singing, Rock of Ages, Rock of Ages, clap for me. At the end of day, when work was over, and when the evening meal was done, Dad would read to us from the family Bible, and we'd count our many blessings one by one. I can see us sitting round the table when from the family Bible Dad would read, and I can hear my mama softly singing, Rock of Ages, clap for me. Rock of Ages, clap for me.
Bobby, you worked for many years with one of the greatest singers of gospel songs and hymns that the world has ever known, the great Red Foley.
Right.
You talked to Red one time about what he was thinking when he was singing those hymns.
Yeah, I asked him because he did the hymns so well, and every night, of course, he would close the show on the Ozark Jubilee with a hymn, and I said, Red, you know, you really have such a way of singing hymns. What's your secret to that? Do you have a special secret to that? He said, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. He said, I pretend when I'm singing these hymns that I'm sitting on my mama's couch and I look across the room to my mama and papa and I sing to them. And if you remember, at the end of every show, he said, good night, mama, good night, papa. And great singer, but the greatest singer of hymns I've ever known.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might have told this story before, but made me think of that. But he used to go for Berea, to the homecoming. Were you ever there, Bobby?
Yes.
Yeah, and one time I got to go work there, and his mother and father were there. And I might have mentioned this before, but it was so wonderful, and you could feel the presence of the Lord because he was outside, and he was singing God Walks These Hills with Me, and you could see him up there, walking back there, and I'm telling you, it's just like, I don't know, you expected God to walk over any minute, but his mother and father there, and you said singing to them, but it was
Right.
just such a wonderful thing. It's always been in my mind, that particular performance and that homecoming at Berea. It was great. I was so glad to get to be there.
I had the privilege of working a show with Red Foley at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and this was after my son had been at Fort Polk, and he was such a comfort to me when we were there, and it was outside, and all these guys in fatigues and everything, and they just come in off of what do you call it? Bivouac, yeah. And anyway, we're all sitting out there in the open field, and it was hot and everything. And of course, I got up there and did my best, and I can't remember who else was on the show. But that was the first time I think I had ever literally seen anyone hold an audience in the palm of their hand. And those guys were all out there yelling and everything, but when Red Foley stepped on that stage, it was like just a peace, a quiet fell over there. And you could have heard a pin drop. And all those hundreds of guys out there, and it brought tears to my eyes. In fact, I cried. And but I was so thankful that he was there for these guys, because most of them were going to Vietnam. And when he sang Peace in the Valley and all these, it was, well, it was something else. And I'm thankful that I was a part of it.
You know, Bill, I worked with Red the last show that he worked the night that he passed away. And the last words that he uttered on stage was, "Good night, Mama, good night, Pop." Of course, they were gone, but he always done this. I don't think people really realize the impact that Red Foley had on the gospel scene, even though he was considered a country singer. Charlie?
Well, I was fortunate enough to get to work a couple performances with Red Foley. And although I love his singing, I think he's one of the sweetest, greatest narrators of the talking songs. I love that. And he had the best control. You know, you run into these people that bug you in the audience sometimes. I know Homer and Jethro always just lived and hoped for a heckler in the audience. But Red Foley had the neatest way to handle and I was on the show once when he did that. He had some guy, just when he was fixing to do his hymn, this guy got loud in the audience. And he said, "Well, I could call you bad names because I got the microphone, you know." And he said, "I used to do that." He said, "But one time I had a guy about like that, and I called him all kind of names and everything. And then after the show, this little old lady came up to the stage and said, 'Mr. Foley, about a month ago we found out that you was going to come here and do a show tonight. And I just knew I had to come. I couldn't get nobody to keep my voice, so I brought him.'" And so by this time, Foley's got tears. He could turn his tears on anytime he wanted to. And he said, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to break another little old mother's heart. And this guy, he probably crawled under a chair.
Wanda Jackson, it is so good to see you and have you here at this particular reunion. I know you worked with Red Foley a lot.
Right. Bobby and I were on the show, and Gene. Who else was?
Leroy.
Leroy, of course.
Yeah.
I didn't know you from the back, Leroy. Who? Billy Walker was there. Right. Those were great days, and I was just enjoying listening to what everyone said about Red. He was a great humanitarian.
Didn't you once quit country music and go into strictly gospel music
Yes,
for a while?
Shortly after I was saved, yeah, because simply I didn't ever divorce country music, you know. But it's kind of like the same thing happened to me that happened to Charlie Walker. I was recording for Capitol. Well, I got saved, and I was all excited about the Lord and wanted to get the message out the only way I knew how to sing. And so Capitol said, "Okay, do one." So I did one, and a couple of years went by, and I said, "I'm ready to do another gospel album." They said, "Another one? Nobody needs any more than one." So they said maybe I should pursue a gospel recording contract, and I guess I'm one of the few who asked for a release from Capitol Records. You know, that's not done too often. But singing for the Lord was more important for me, and I haven't regretted a bit of it.
recorded one of my songs.
I sure did. Satisfied. I still do it on every gospel concert. Yes, that one too. Right.
Sing one for us, Wanda.
Yeah. This is so nice to sit around and hear everyone in country music talking so freely and openly about the Lord. Because I think all of us remember days when, even if you loved the Lord, you didn't talk about it so much, you know. And I think it's great. God bless every one of you who are a testimony for the Lord. I'm like Charlie. I can't sing sitting down. I'm too short. When I sit down, there's nothing left of me. Yeah, let's try this. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. And my treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door. And I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Like you. Heaven is not my home. Then, Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Well, they're all expecting me, and this one thing I know, 'cause I fixed that up with Jesus 27 years ago. And I know he'll welcome me, for I am weak and poor, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Help me out, y'all, I need you. Oh, Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven is not my home, then, Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home. I can't be at home in this world anymore.
Bill, excuse me, could I just say one more thing before we stop thinking about our wonderful Red Foley? As you said, a humanitarian. I got to do the show one time and start thinking about how music's gone and how, like, a lot of people in the early days, like you said, you love to talk about the Lord. Sometimes there were Christians that didn't really talk about it, and some of the promoters would, if you talked about him, you didn't get to work for him again, things like that. I know a lot of you experienced that too. And but anyway, I had a song called Set Him Free, which was a first Grammy-nominated song and also got me on the Grand Ole Opry. And I went out to do the song, which I thought that's why they had me come out there. And I had just lost a little dog, too, and we talked about the animals. And by the way, I'm going to go to the church where they pray for the animals, too. I'll throw that in. I do that. But anyway, they knew that I'd lost a little dog, and I was all sad about that. And then I got out there, and they said, you can't do that song. And I said, you know, it was in the top 10. I thought that's why I was there. And I knew I was going to get a sign with the Opry, and it was because it was about a divorce, you know, and you just didn't talk about that either. So it was weird. You couldn't talk about the Lord, but you couldn't talk about the divorce. So it was kind of strange in those days. But anyway, I was all sad. But right before time to do the show, after rehearsal, they brought this little Pekingese dog, which is the kind that I'd lost. His name was Tinker. And they brought that in and gave me a wire later from Red and Simon, which I still have today. May the cold nose of Tinker, too, remind you of the warm friends you have here at Ozark Jubilee. So I've still got that on my wall. And, of course, that little dog lived to be about 17 years old, so he was indeed a humanitarian.
Wow. Great story.
Bill, I've got a funny, I've got a funny story about Red Foley. And those of you that knew him, he was very cool, right? I mean, you never shook Red Foley up about anything. Well, we had done a show somewhere, and we got on the plane the next morning, going to our next concert place, and we got off as we got to the door of the airplane, and Red was behind me. And the light hit his eyes, and he said, "Oh, my goodness, has somebody got some sunglasses?" And I had some, but they had rhinestones all the way around them. You know, really prissy little sunglasses. And so I looked around, nobody else offered, so I said, "Well, here you go." He put them on, went through the hotel, signed autographs, we got on the elevator, all of us go up to our rooms, and he took them off, and he said, "Whose are these?" And I said, "They're mine." He said, "My, those are pretty." Never even dawned on him. He'd been walking through the hotel with those women.
Jim Ed, you're talking about singing in the little church. Weren't many people. Now, did your sisters, did Maxine and Bonnie come and join you? I mean, I can just picture the three of y'all standing up and singing those beautiful hymns in this little church.
You know what? I don't remember whether they were all singing along with me or just exactly what it was, because I was too young. You know, I was born before I,
Johnny says we have to tell the truth.
Do I have to tell the truth, John?
Yeah. Save that for the country show.
But I suppose they were singing along. Bonnie never did sing a lot with us, though. Bonnie was one of those that she was a late bloomer, you know, and she only started singing after she graduated from high school. With us anyway. She sang in the high school choir and all, but I suppose that Mother had all of us singing at one time or another, you know. But and my daddy, you know, whenever he could go to church with us, he would. But I loved to sing, and these old songs, Mother would go around the house singing them. But can I do a little bit of a song that, to me, this song tells a great story, and it kind of reminds me of that little church where we first started going. It's called the Church in the Wildwood. There's a church in the valley by the wildwood, no lovelier place in the dale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the wildwood. Come to the church in the vale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. So sweet on a clear Sabbath morning to listen to the clear ringing bell. No song so sweet, I forgot the words to my song, as the little brown church in the vale. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the wildwood. Come to the church in the vale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale.
One of my favorite songs. There really is, haven't we, somewhere in my travels, I seem to think I have seen the church that inspired that. Somebody help me.
Well,
isn't there a little brown church? I seem to think it's in Iowa.
I don't know where it is, but I've seen them.
In Missouri, Jack?
I believe it's in Missouri, but it's not Branson. It's one of those little places down south of Branson. I've been there before.
I think it's in Albert Brumley.
Well, I've seen this little church everywhere.
It's in Iowa.
You know,
Bobby Lord has decided it's in Iowa.
I think it's in Alabama.
Or wherever it is, I know there's a real church that inspired that song.
There is.
All the good things in Alabama.
This is a funny story. This is a true story. We had recorded our gospel album, and we put this song in there. And so Kelso Hurst and I were thinking about, what are we going to call it? Well, we kept thinking and waiting and trying to find out what we was going to call it. And before we did, the New York people had heard the songs. And one guy up there, I guess, they wrote back to Kelso on the telephone. He said, I got the perfect title for this album. The Little Brown Church in the Dale. Because they thought, it's Dale that I was saying, I was Little Brown Church in the Dale.
We called it.
So help me. But don't you know it came out that way?
Yeah.
The Little
DEL?
Brown Church in the DEL.
DEL.
Yes. That was the title of the album.
This is a true story, too. And when I was about, I don't know how old I was, but I was young, and I went to church to sing, and I was going to sing Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam. And my mama had me all fixed up, and I kept going, and I could never get it started right. And finally she just said, sit down. So I had to sit down. So a few months later, I taught myself how to chord on the piano. And a few months later, the preacher came by, and she said, now, why don't you sing a nice song for the preacher? And I said, okay. And I was very ornery. You might not know that, but I was a very ornery child. So I sat down at the little, yes, I was. So I sat down, I knew I was going to get flogged, but it was better to do it and didn't get flogged. So I sat down at the piano and I played Pistol Packin' Mama, lay that pistol down, drinking beer in a cabaret, and both of them, and what she would do, she would give me the eye, like that. I got the worst whipping, one of the worst I ever got.
I got to tell, that reminds me, that must have been in 1942.
Oh, I don't know. She
Because
was
Pistol
born in
Pack.
48.
I know you're not that old. Well, because Pistol Packin' Mama was on everybody's tongue. When she said she started singing Pistol Packin' Mama, it just rung a bell in my head. We were at Sunday school one day, and whenever Pistol Packin' Mama was hot, whatever year it was, and the Sunday school teacher said, would someone like to get up and sing a song? And sure enough, I got up and started singing Pistol Packin' Mama. And she says, why, son, that's not the kind of songs we sing in church.
Y'all would have known y'all could have done it 2 years ago.
Yeah, we could have done it.
Hey, don't feel bad about that, because my baby brother, he had one of these little old horn you just kazoo, I call them, you know. And so he was at the church. They had a little play going on there, and he played, Yes, Sir, That's My Baby, No, Sir, I don't.
My youngest daughter, Jenny, when she was just about 3 years old or so, went to church with us one time at Christmas time. And the preacher got up at the end of the service, and he said, we're going to close the service. Everybody's singing Joy to the World. And my little daughter jumped up and said, that's my favorite song, Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
Bill, I have to raise my hand. Speaking of funny stories, my youngest daughter, Anita, I'm pretty sure it was Anita, not Missy, but anyway, she was in the preschool, little Sunday school at church, and she loved Bobby Bear, and still does. But, I mean, she could remember all the words to all these albums. I mean, not only Bobby Bear, but Elvis, whatever. And but they were very much into the preschool and the Sunday school and everything. Well, they went one morning, and the teacher was asking all the little children to sing their favorite little Bible song. So she got up and sang, I was sitting in Fridays sucking on a glass of wine. That song of Bobby Bear's called when in walked this chick, her legs were long and fine, and before they got her stopped and said, no, that wasn't it. And they had a talk with my son and daughter-in-law after that. She also knew Jesus loved me, but she wouldn't sing it.
While you've got the floor, sing us a song.
All right, I chose one. I'm like the rest of them. I can't sing sitting down. One that I don't know if everybody known. I've known most of my life. I've just recently learned all the lyrics to really. But we were talking about singing first in church and everything. I didn't really do that. I sang kind of around home, but we didn't have a church that close in West Plains, out in the country. But we had one, very small, little church, but it was only when the preacher was in town, because he was a traveling preacher. And sometimes it'd be on Saturday or Tuesday or whatever. And he was my brother-in-law's brother-in-law, I think. And it was Uncle Elmer, I remember. And you go to that church, and they didn't have music in the church. Everything was, well, I mean, they had singing, but not instruments. and everything was in minors and everything. And that's where I first heard the song, which I'm not going to sing that song, but Wayfaring Stranger. No, really. But anyway, the preacher would get up there, and when he would preach hellfire and damnation, and I was scared to death because I knew I was going. And but then when he was finished, he'd just quit. He'd say, okay, it's time to sing now. But he'd always say, not you, Ed, you can't carry a tune in a bucket. And Ed was his son. But anyway, that was my experience at church the first time. Okay, we chose one called Unclouded Day that everybody can sing. And please do. Oh, they tell me of a home far beyond the sky. They tell me of a home far away. They tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, the land of a cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where my friends have gone. They tell me of a home far away, where the tree of life in eternal bloom sheds its fragrance on an unclouded day. Oh, the land of a cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Okay, Derek on the piano. While I breathe. Well, they tell me of a king in his glory there. They tell me that mine eyes shall behold, where he sits on a throne that is white as snow, city that is made of gold. Oh, the land of a cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me that he smiles on his children there, and his smiles drive their sorrows away. And they tell me that no tears ever come again in that lovely land of uncloudless day. Oh, the land of a cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Unclouded day.
Good job. Yeah, that's great, James.
You know, Bill, she's talking about funny things that happened in church. Connie Smith was telling me this. 1966, somewhere in that neighborhood, that Ted went to church, and he took a little boy, and they were singing, you know, Amazing Grace, and the last line was blind, but now I see. And everything for quiet for a second, and the little boy went, do-do-do-do-do. I swear, it's very true.
Been hanging around Del Reeves way too long.
Hey, Bill, Carol Lee Cooper's got the sweetest little grandbaby that's ever lived. Carol Lee, tell them the story about the grandbaby going to my favorite story.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I just want to know how old Dale's boy was when he did that.
No, it was Connie took her little boy to school.
You missed the
church.
story, Charlie.
That's okay, Charlie. No, I went to pick up my little grandchildren to take them to
to Sunday school, and they had never been to Sunday school before. And the little girl was just old enough, she just didn't like anything. Just nothing. So one day, first I took her to the park. Where are we going, Gran? They call me Gran. Where are we going, Gran? I said, we're going to the park. No park, no park, no. And I said, yeah, we're going to go to the park. We're going to have a good time. Well, what do you do? Well, I told her you swing and you get your feet in the sand and you run around the lake and you look at the ducks and feed all that kind of thing. So then one morning I picked them up for the Sunday school. And they didn't know where we were going. And I said, where are we going, Gran? I said, we're going to Sunday school in church. And she said, what's that? I said, it's a place where we learn about Jesus. She said, no Jesus, no Jesus. I said, yes, Jesus, and you're going to like him too. Now they just love it.
Johnny Wright, I've been watching you and Miss Kitty sitting over there. Y'all know a lot of these old hymns and gospel songs, don't you?
Oh, I'll tell you for sure we know a lot of them. We learned in Mount Juliet way back before they had automobiles.
You've told all the stories about y'all dating and all that kind of stuff. Did y'all go to church together? Was that part of what you did when you were sparking Miss Kitty?
Well, we never went together for a while, you know, because when I met Kitty, I wasn't going to church.
She changed that.
She straightened you out?
Yeah, Kitty straightened me out, you know. I was born in Mount Juliet. I was a kid, and I did go to church, but I met Kitty in Nashville, back in the early 30s, and we started dating and married in 1937, and she went to church every Sunday, and she really taught me how to sing, what little I know about it. And we get the old guitar and drive around I had an old 31 Chevrolet, and I taught her how to drive. She couldn't drive the car, but we was going down the road one day, and I said, get in this automobile, get on my side here, and I'll get over there, and you drive this car. And she never driven before. And boy, what a driver she was. I wanted to stop at a grocery store and get us a cold drink, you know. So I said, stop here, and she just wheeled in, slid the wheel, threw rocks everywhere.
Waited till he got right up to the place and said, pull in here. So I did.
That's when he started the church.
All of a sudden.
That's when he found religion.
That's when they started to pray.
Yeah, that's when I learned to pray. That's right. I said, oh, Lord, help me that I may never ask her to drive again.
I can drive better than that now, though, a little better.
She drives now. We nicknamed her Dale Walter. We call her DW. When she comes
I
over,
don't drive that fast.
she comes over to the museum, we'll say, here comes DW. She'll wheel in. She waits till she gets right to the place, then zip, she'll pull it.
Well, you taught me that.
When Johnny and Jack were recording, y'all did some gospel things, didn't you?
We sure did. We did a lot of gospel songs, and we still do. On the show every night, we feature 2 or 3 gospel songs. We'll have Kitty lead one, and then we'll all team up with her. And then we do a lot of songs like He Will Set Your Fields on Fire and Farther Along, and just a little talk with Jesus and different ones like that. But I usually do the lead on it, and Kitty get the high part, and then we have our son Bobby that does the bass. We do a lot of them like that. And
well, you got a whole choir here with you today. Do a little bit of just a little talk with Jesus. That's a
all right. And we always do a couple of verses, but I say there's 3 down here. We can do, if you want to, we'll do the first verse, and then have a little play out, and then come back and do the last one. Or we'll try to do the third along with it. I may kind of mess it up a little, but we can take the mess out.
Do what you want to do. Just enjoy.
Yeah, we'll start it off and let the band take it off, and then I'll come in here and do the verse, and then everybody can pick it. It takes a bass in it, you know how to sing it. Stonewall and get the bass on it. Jimmy I once was lost in sin, but Jesus took me in, and just a little talk with Jesus set me going.
made my heart in love and wrote my name above. And just a little talk with Jesus made me whole. Have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. Feel the prayer turning and know his fire is burning you. Have a little talk with Jesus makes it right. I may have doubts and fears, my eyes may fill with tears, but Jesus is a friend who watches day and night. I go to him in prayer, he knows my every care, and just a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus, let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry, he will answer by and by. Feel his prayer turning and know his fire is burning you. While we'll talk with Jesus makes it right. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. Feel the prayer turning and know his fire is burning you. While we'll talk with Jesus makes it right.
Great job.
Thank you.
That's a good. I guess everybody knows that among us here today, we actually have one of our Opry members, country music stars, who's an ordained minister, Stu Phillips.
That's right.
Episcopal Church, is that right?
That's right. Well, Bill, I've been listening to all these old stories, and especially where people talking about where they sang their first songs, and that, when I was a kid, grew up right after the Depression, I didn't know the difference between a country song and a gospel song. The only thing I knew is that it had a nice melody and nice words, and people liked that you sang it. And I, during that time when I was young, my family had been hard hit by the Depression and the war years and things like that, and I went out to work early and had to get some money coming in, and I shoveled snow, and I cut grass for 3 churches. One was a Methodist church, a Baptist church, and my own little Episcopal church. And so I used to go around to each congregation every 3rd Sunday because I'm doing a little PR work. I needed that job, and I wanted to be seen in the congregation. And because of that, I learned some wonderful, wonderful songs, over the years, songs that I sing today. I don't even remember sitting down trying to learn the words to those songs. And I guess if they had a hit parade back and then, songs on the hit parade were things like You Are My Sunshine, and Governor Jimmy Davis was one of my favorite singers, and I used to think that must be the promised land somewhere down there in Louisiana. Mind, I'm way up in Calgary at this time, where the head of the government sings a song and has it on the hit parade. Got to go visit that someday. But I never forget that, and never forget one of his songs that's been an all-time favorite of mine all down through the years. And I'd like to sing a little bit about that. But right now, you mentioned that I'm in the church. I'm a member of the Episcopal Church, and the leader of the Episcopal Church is called a priest. And I wear vestments, like the Catholic Church, very colorful vestments. And one day I was standing there just ready to do the service, and a tiny little guy came up from the kindergarten in church school, and he tugs at my robes, and he says, "Hello, God." I didn't want to spoil a child's illusion, so I never told him any difference, but he's old enough now to know the difference.
Sing us that song.
Many years ago, in days of childhood, I used to play till evening shadows come. Then winding down an old familiar pathway, well, I heard my mama call that set of sun, sing on. Come home, it's supper time. The shadows lengthen fast. Come home, it's supper time. We're going home at last. One day, beside her bedside, I was kneeling, and angel wings were winnowing the air. Ah, she heard the call of supper time in heaven, and now I know she's waiting for me there. Come home, it's supper time. The shadows lengthen fast. Come home, it's supper time. We're going home at last. Little turnaround now. In vision now, I see her standing yonder, and her familiar voice I hear once more. She heard the call of supper time in heaven, and now I know she's waiting for me there. Come home, it's supper time. The shadows lengthen fast. Come home, it's supper time. We're going home at last. Yes, we're going home at last.
Beautiful. Oh, that's great.
I don't know if you heard what Glenn was playing on the fiddle now, but sure was pretty, wasn't it?
Whole band's doing a great job.
Yeah, they
I think we
always
need to thank all of them. Jimmy Capps, Glenn Duncan, Mike Johnson, Les Singer, Randy Hardison, David Smith, and Dirk Johnson.
Les Singer owes me a check.
Hey, Stu, you were talking about the little boy asking if you were God. A preacher up at a little church in Maine told me a story this summer. He said that in his church, they have a brass plaque that hangs, and engraved on this plaque are the names of all the members of the church who have died serving our country in the military service somewhere around the world, back to the First World War, the Second World War, so forth. He said he was standing there by that plaque one morning, and this little boy was standing there looking up at all of these names. And the little boy said to the preacher, he said, what are all of those names? And the preacher said, those are the members of our church who have died in the service. The little boy said, which one, 8:30 or 11 o'clock?
Check my calendar.
I think on that we need to take a break, and we'll be back with more of Country's Family Reunion in a minute.
How much of it's going to play? Is that too fast? Is that right?
If you've been sitting in your favorite pew for the last hour, you may be on that first box of Kleenex. Those of you who have lost loved ones know how Bill Carlisle feels. It's been a rough year. First, Grandpa Jones passed away, and then his wife went to be with the Lord. Supper time really touched him. I trust it touched you too. While the Whites get ready for the next volume, let me tell you what's coming. Martha Carson in Satisfied, George Hamilton IV in Life's Railway to Heaven, Gene Shepard with What a Friend We Have in Jesus, Jimmy C. Newman in Farther Along, Stonewall Jackson in Kneel at the Cross, Billy Walker in Where Could I Go But to the Lord, and of course, the Whites. See you in a little bit.
In that bright land.